Mr. Champagne, welcome back to Power Play. How are you today?
It's very good to be with you. Thank you for having me on the show. Great news today for southwestern Ontario and Niagara and Port Colborne, I would say. You should have seen the smile on the face of people.
Smiles on the faces of people, but not a lot of details on the jobs that will be created by this investment. We haven't seen it because it says in your news release that they're currently being finalized, all of those numbers, and that they'll be announced at a later date. Why aren't you able to say how many jobs are being created with this?
Well, it's clear that you'll have hundreds of construction jobs and hundreds of jobs, obviously, to operate the plant. They're still finalizing all of these details, but we know because we've seen when you're having a plan of $1.6 billion to do separators. And the good news, they selected Canada. You may have heard the CEO of the company was saying initially when they were looking at extending outside of Japan, they were looking at Europe, they were looking at the United States. Canada came third. But our effort to say that we have the best workers, we have renewable energy, we have critical minerals, led them to invest. I think it's one of their first, if not their first investment outside of Japan. And it's not only the jobs of today, I would say, but when you have a plan of that magnitude, you're talking for jobs for decades to come, for the next 30, 50 years, and all the supply chain, because you know what's interesting, I think, for Canadians and Canadian workers is now we're bringing technology that did not exist in Canada, know-how that is going to help us, obviously, to build a full supply chain here in Canada when it comes to the battery, and that, I think, is a big win for the country.
Your government has faced questions about job guarantees attached to these types of large announcements. What percentage of the jobs at this plant will be going to Canadians?
Well, listen, when we have discussions with international investors like Asahi and others, we always maximize the benefits for Canadian workers, whether it's during construction, operating the plant, but also during the full supply chain. That's always part of the discussions, and we always want to maximize that. And honestly, they need Canadian workers to do that. They understand that. They want to transfer technology. I mean, you've heard it even from the CEO. He said, this is the first time they're going outside of Japan, and they're looking to transfer technology, bring know-how so that not only we have the best separator, that's what they're building in the battery, but that we can improve on the technology from Canada. So it's a net benefit when it comes to technology, certainly in terms of jobs, because these are very large investment. You're talking about $1.6 billion. And what's interesting also, this is plugging a gap in the full value chain that we have been trying to get in Canada, because what we want is to have all the components to build the battery in the electric vehicle, and the separator is a key component, and Asahi is the leader in the world. So I would say it's a home run for Canada and certainly the region, now that we're going to be able to provide that to the manufacturers in North America.
Yeah, Minister, you keep saying that you want to maximize Canadian jobs. What exactly does that mean? Can you tell our viewers what you mean by maximizing Canadian jobs, and what percentage of the jobs at these plants will be Canadian workers?
Well, listen, maximizing is that you want to push every possibilities, whether it's in the supply chain, the construction, operation. Obviously, these plants operate with Canadian workers. They need Canadian workers, and certainly that's the same thing what you see at Windsor. That's the same thing you see in St. Thomas with Volkswagen. That's the same thing you're going to see here. Same thing you see in Bécancour. Those are Canadian workers. They operate these plants. And during the construction phase, yes, sometimes you may have a few people who need to come to transfer technology, to make sure that we keep the warranty for the equipment. But by the way, this is no different. All our trade workers know that, because sometimes, by the way, we have Canadians going abroad to do that. And we had Americans coming in Canada before when we had these big plants for a period of time during construction and transfer of technology and know-how. But then, obviously, the vast majority of these jobs are always with Canadians. That's why they came to Canada, is to operate that with Canadian workers.
Yeah, and I ask you because we know that what we had seen with that plant in Windsor, Canada's building trades union had sent your government a letter saying that LG's Nexstar EV battery plant was employing international workers, while more than 100 local skilled workers were not being used. Have you given CBTU assurances that that won't happen in Port Colborne?
Well, we're always on the same side. I met with the leadership of CBTU. I know the folks we've been working hand in hand. They now have a committee I spoke with the CEO of Stellantis in North America, spoke to the CEO of Nexstar in Windsor. We have helped to create a committee there. But let's put things in proportion. I mean, last time I checked, you had like 72 foreign workers and close to 1,900 Canadian workers on site. So let's make sure we keep the big picture in place. The vast majority, more than 95%, are Canadians at the construction site today, and they're all going to be Canadians operating the plant. And that's something that our folks know very well. They know I'm on their side. We're working hand in hand, and that's why I'm saying maximizing. Every job that can be done here will be done by Canadians.
Minister, your federal government is spending billions in taxpayer dollars on the EV supply chain, and I know that you're very proud of it, but when can Canadians expect a return on that investment?
Well, you see, I would say those are very good investments because honestly, what makes these big companies come to Canada, and I've been there with Vic Fedeli and others to make the case for Canada, it's always the fact that we have the best workers in the world. And then you say, obviously, we have the ecosystem, we have the critical minerals, renewable energy, access to market. But I can tell you, it's never about subsidies. We're probably the cheapest that you find because we're competing with a number of states in the United States. In this case, you heard the CEO, we were competing with Europe. So I can assure you the return on investment is some of the best you can find in the industry because these plants, when they're here, they're going to be here for generations and generations. You're not investing $1.6 billion in a plant for 5-10 years. It reminds me when we were with Volkswagen, the CEO at the time, when he came to Canada, he said, listen, Canada may offer me support for 4 years. I need to operate for 100 years. That means 96 years for which we need to be on our own. So I can assure you that Canadians are getting their money back because these investments are attracting other investment. You know, when I started, we had none of that in the country, or very little of it. We went out, we pitched Canada, we said we're the jurisdiction, now you see one after the other, and all of that, you don't need to take it from me, but in the G7 country, we're the country which received the largest amount of investment per capita, and in the world, you look, you had the United States, Brazil, Canada came third. This is extraordinary, and I think Canadians should be really proud that we seize the moment, we've been ambitious, we bring that. That's almost a dividend to the next generations because I was in the high school this morning, the kids, you should have seen the spark. They know that in Port Colborne, in Niagara, in southwestern Ontario, the future is being built right at their doorstep. That's the future we want for our kids.
Yeah, and I want to talk to you a little bit about that future because your government has that goal to make all new car sales to be zero-emission vehicles by the year 2035. However, many have said that the charging network in this country really needs to ramp up. What are you doing to ensure that people feel like they can buy these vehicles that will be made in Canada and have the confidence that they can continue to drive them and charge them? Because a lot of people are saying our network just isn't ready for it.
Yeah, we need to do both. You're quite right. We need to continue to invest in charging infrastructure with local communities, local government, provincial government, territorial government, and the federal government, obviously. But at the same time, it's great that now we're not going to be only buying these cars, but we're going to make them in Canada. And I think that's a sense of pride. Wherever I go and meet the workers is that now they understand that now we're going to build them in Canada, that we're going to capture the value, the wealth that's being created around that is going to be here by Canadians for Canadians. So clearly we're going to keep investing in the infrastructure we need, but at the same time, we have positioned Canada as the leader of the electric vehicle manufacturing sector, which I think is a great achievement. If you look where we started and where we are today, when I started, there were some that were saying, Minister, that might be the end with this transformation of the auto sector in Canada. We may end up like the UK or Australia. And now we turn that around. You know, when I go in Tokyo or in Seoul or in Germany, people talk to me about Port Colborne. They talk to me about St. Thomas. They talk to me about Bécancour in Quebec. It's quite extraordinary that in such a limited amount of time, we've been able to be the focus of the world when it comes to the EV vehicle of the future.
But Minister, with respect, you still have very little time to try and build up that charging network that will have Canadians buy those cars that are rolling off of those supply lines. So when is the government going to start announcing that there will be more charging stations out there so that Canadians can have the faith to make sure that they will actually be able to charge those cars? Because there's some estimates out there that say that you need to have 100 new public chargers come online every day in order to just meet that need.
Well, listen, I hear you, and I must say we are working on that. You know, local communities are doing that as well. I've seen a number of municipalities, regional government. We're going to work hand in hand in that. But I think it's great that not only the demand for the vehicle, but the supply of the vehicle, we're going to come from Canada. And certainly we are committed to that. We're committing to investing in infrastructure. And you know, these two things are not, they're very complementary. We're going to do the vehicle, and therefore it's going to drive adoption, bring the price of vehicle down. That's what Canadians want to see. They want these electric vehicles to be affordable. The more we bring the supply chain here in Canada, in the United States, and North America, the more we benefit.
Minister Champagne, thanks for being on Power Play. We appreciate this.
It's always a pleasure. Thank you, and I look forward to talk to you again very soon.